Hi everyone. Welcome to our last summary of the term. I want to thank everyone for a great term. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about ethics, a little bit about some aspects of the legal system with regard to healthcare. There's obviously about a million other different things that we can learn, especially with regard to the law, but hopefully you've enjoyed the small amount that we have been able to cram into the past 8 weeks, and continue to keep absorbing those types of aspects of the legal system, and keep considering the ethical dilemmas that you'll deal with as a healthcare leader or as a clinician, for our friends that are in clinical programs. Keep considering those aspects when you get out there, and or now in your current roles, if you're out there working in these different aspects of of the healthcare system. So last week, I think the topic, or specifically the discussion, that video that we watch, and all of that discussion around that particular error, I think, is interesting, and I appreciate folks sharing their stories, and um, just an interesting thing to consider, especially with regard to just culture. And I know that you talked a little bit, in the paper. I haven't graded papers yet, but just culture and just patient safety culture in general, whether just culture itself, that kind of just culture, is a specific, it's something that you buy. It's actually a program, but a lot of facilities have bought into that. But even if you haven't, just a good patient safety culture and the ethics that surround that, as opposed to placing placing blame on a single person, kind of diffusing a situation, and looking at the system. So, kind of, if you want to place blame on something, place the blame across the system. Where did things go wrong across the system, as opposed to saying, well, it's all that person's fault, because typically it's not. When there is a when there's a problem, some kind of an error, it's usually a system failure. So looking at the system, and where were the errors across that system, where were the failures, and how can we fix that going forward. But one of the things in the discussion where we talked a little bit about is, how can we be proactive as opposed to reactive when there's a problem? How can we avoid that problem from happening again in the future? So, or how can we avoid that problem from ever happening? So, how can we be proactive, making sure that patients are safe to start with? So I thought it was an interesting topic, and definitely something to consider for folks that work in the hospital industry, or plan to work in the hospital industry. You'll definitely be exposed to patient safety. It's a huge element of hospital work, and it's becoming infused in the long-term care industry as well. But it's not something, if you're in the physician practice world, it's not something that's really thought of very often, because we make the assumption that patients are pretty safe in the short amount of time that they spend in the physician practice. But it's really something that needs to start to make its way into physician practice, just because of medication errors that can occur, those types of things. So it's it's patient safety is not as, I'm going to say, pervasive in physician practice, but if it is an area you're interested in working in, or that you do work in currently, it's something to consider, that it's going to start moving into that area as well. I think we're going to see more and more. Not that we don't have a culture of safety. Of course, we always want to keep our patients safe, but we don't have patient safety officers. We don't have typically big patient safety programs, unless you're part of a much larger organization, like UPMC physician practices may have something, because there is a larger UPMC patient safety program. But an independent physician practice is less likely to have a patient safety program, because it's just simply not something that is part of their life, as a non-institutional entity. Okay, so good work on the quiz this week. There were only a couple questions that were kind of outside the realm of what was most people got everything correct. So there wasn't allowed a lot of things to discuss, but I do have a few questions that I thought I would mention. First question was, healthcare could create a similar system to what kind of industry? And this was making reference specifically to the textbook where it talked about um, how healthcare could kind of take a turn from in a couple different industries, but only one of them is mentioned in the answers here. Healthcare could take a turn from specifically the aviation industry. Aviation was our correct answer, but specifically with regard to work hours. So this kind of plays into, interesting because the book wasn't speaking specifically to patient safety, but it does play into what we were talking about in discussions and whatnot. But with work hours, like pilots have to only work a certain number of hours and then they need to have rest. And for a long time, there really weren't work hour restrictions with regard to physicians, resident physicians. They could work any number of work hours. Then they have put some restrictions in place, but there really are no restrictions for non-resident physicians. If you're a resident, meaning that resident physicians are, for those of you that aren't familiar, so residents are folks that have graduated from medical school. You go on to do your residency. So your residency is that time period after you're a medical school graduate, but you're not really you're not a full-fledged physician yet. You're kind of physician in practice. So you typically do have a license at that point, depending on where you are in your residency. You may have your license to practice medicine, but you're still kind of in practice. And the length of your residency is going to vary based on your specialty. So if you're going into, say, neurosurgery, your residency is going to be quite long. I think neurosurgery residency is like 7 years. If you are, say, a family practice resident, it's going to be much shorter. So depends on your chosen specialty. But so resident physicians do put in a lot of work hours, many more hours than probably most of us work in a week, because they really do spend a lot of time in the hospital setting or wherever it is that they're working. But aviation does put specific requirements on pilots can only work so many hours, etc. So shouldn't we expect that same kind of thing out of the healthcare industry, not only for our physicians, but also if you think about it for nurses, for not just resident physicians, but other physicians, other practitioners, such as non-physician practitioners, PAs, nurse practitioners, those types of folks as well. So it really could benefit our industry to create that similar type of situation. Next question. Hospitals suffer from over-reporting and not enough data. So the answer to that is false. The folks that need to deal with the data and creating that data and whatnot may actually think that's true, but it is generally false. If we think about both evidence-based medicine in the hospital setting or our patient safety when we're doing and actually this week we'll look at FMEAs and RCAs, so those are all data-based. A lot of things that we do in the hospital setting, just decision support in general, everything is based on data. And without data, we're just guessing. So we really aren't ever there's really never enough data. The more data we can get, the more effective we'll be. And there's more and more and more. There are more and more situations where we need to report out to various organizations, be it a state government or the federal government or an accrediting body such as Joint Commission. So we're not really ever over-reporting because we're just doing what's required of us. So it's not necessarily about over-reporting. So the answer to that was false. The final question had to do with the evidence cycle. So this was on one of our articles that we read this past week. The evidence cycle contains the following. So the evidence cycle is assess, ask, acquire, appraise, and apply. And this question actually threw in associate as well. So we definitely don't need that associate in there. It was all of them except for associate. So our evidence cycle is the five elements: assess, ask, acquire, appraise, and apply. Are those elements, and there is that article. If that is one that you got wrong, in the classroom there was a whole article that deals with the evidence cycle. I think it was titled the evidence cycle. So check that out, and it'll give you some more details about the evidence cycle, what the five elements are, the five A's, and it'll give you a bit more detail about that. But most everybody did get that question right, so I won't go into a lot of detail on it since almost everyone got that right. So I do want, again, that's all I have. I do want to thank you again for a great term. It's been very enjoyable. I don't know if we have anyone graduating in this class, but if we do have anyone that's graduating this term, congrats. If not, look forward to seeing some of you perhaps next term in HSAM 1500, or in the second half. I'm teaching another economics course in the second half of summer, so I'm not sure if I have any of you in that HSAM class. But if not, hopefully I'll see some of you in the fall in something. And I look forward to working with everyone. If I don't get to see you again, if you're not in our HSAM program, I wish you the best here at RMU or wherever it is that you study. I think we have a Gannon student with us this term as well, so I wish you the best. And good luck to everyone, and finish strong, and have a great summer if I don't see you, and we'll see y'all in the fall. Thanks so much.